Hello, welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Moto. Today's episode is based on a really good topic. It's all about girl power. Well, actually, specifically Japanese women in the sake industry. And for this episode, it was a no-brainer that we were gonna pick this sake right here. It is called Yuho Yamadanishiki Junmai, and it's actually by Mioya Brewery in Ishikawa Prefecture. And it's a no-brainer for us because the CEO of this brewery, Miss Fujita, is female. She is a boss lady, amazing personality. We really love talking to her. And she's also doing wonders in terms of breathing fresh air back into her family brewery. So we obviously had to drink this one for this episode. So here's the woman in the sake industry. Goodbye. We'll talk more about this beautiful sake and Miss Fujita herself later on. But first, let's talk about women in the sake industry. And actually, to set some context, let's talk about women in the Japanese workforce in general. Because unfortunately, Japanese women still do face a lot of harsh obstacles when it comes to having a career, let alone trying to advance within their field. And I'm just going to read out a few statistics and just to, express the gravity of the situation. So despite progress, Japan's gender pay gap is the third largest among OECD countries. In 2017, Japanese women earned 24.5 less than their male counterparts. And in terms of leadership, women make up an estimated 1% of senior managers. While the number of working females is increasing, the infrastructure is still not there to support working mothers. So as of October 2018, there were 47,198 children on waiting lists for daycare centers across the country. And also this last statistic here is pretty crazy. Apparently Japanese women spend on average 3 hours and 44 minutes on unpaid labor per day, which is like household chores and taking care of their children, compared to an average of only 41 minutes per man. So I feel like actually Japanese women are kind of setting a standard too high in terms of household chores. Like I don't do 3 hours.
I think it just expressed the Asian culture.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Like women are just doing cleaning. Like my Japanese mother used to be like cleaning all the time, even though it was like spotless.
Well, I remember my dad washed a lot of dishes.
Oh really? Nice. He's like breaking the...
He cleaned toilet as well.
Nice, good on him. This is good. Actually, you were saying that when you're stressed, you like to clean a lot.
Sometimes to clear my mind.
Wow, so this is great. So you guys are just shattering this stupid gender inequality. But apparently in Japan, not quite the case. So this is the kind of environment we're working with. Do you think that in the sake world it's actually better for women or worse?
I think it's better because women pay more attention to details.
Okay.
So when they make sake, they will just take like more precautions in every step.
Yeah. And that was a very good answer. So I think people agree with you because actually women in the sake industry, they do have a lot more opportunities actually now than kind of the rest of what I explained before. Again, just to give it a little bit more context, taken from the same year in 2017, 7.5% of all the 1,200 or so breweries in Japan had female presidents, and more than 30 had women toji or head brewers. So sure, it's not like the most impressive numbers, but Japanese women are not, it's not like a shock for them to be in the breweries. Yeah. They're not commonplace yet, but it's not, it's not like a taboo thing, which actually for centuries, it was taboo. Women actually were actually not allowed to even step foot in a sake brewery in the past. And it was only World War II where there were no men to keep family breweries up and running, that they had to resort to, reveal to.
Okay.
Cut this part out. It was only World War II actually that there were no men around that they had to resort to asking for the help of women in order to keep the family breweries alive. So why until World War II were there centuries when women were banned from sake breweries, especially when females were the first producers of sake? So if we go way back now, so if we go back to the 5th to the 3rd century BCE, this is when the first primitive version of sake was born. This primitive version of sake is called kuchikami no sake. It literally means mouth chew sake. So during those ancient times, they found out that if they chew rice a lot and they spit it into a pot, then after a while, there would be this low ABV version of an alcoholic brew.
Oh.
So later on, we found out that it's because the enzymes in your saliva actually has the function of breaking down the starches in the rice. And then when they spit it out into the pot, natural occurring yeast just fall into the pot and it produces the sake. But anyways, back then they had no idea, but they would just chew the rice, spit it out. But the responsibility of all that chewing apparently fell upon the females of each village. Females are the first producers of sake. Now let's jump forward to the Edo period. So this is the end of the 17th century. The government of the time, Tokugawa shogunate, basically radically changed the sake industry. Until then, they were able to brew all year round, but the Tokugawa shogunate said brewing could only happen in the winter months. This actually made a radical difference for the lives of people like farmers, fishermen, basically people who live in coastal areas or people who live in harsh climates in the winter, because they are completely out of a job during the winter months. So the fact that sake brewing was solely concentrated in the winter months meant that these men from these areas would travel the country looking for a sake brewery ready to hire seasonal laborers. And so the men would travel around, look for a sake brewery to work at, while the women were meant to tend to the home. So these men would work from October to April, the whole brewing season, inside the brewing facilities. They would live and breathe sake brewing. During these times, these guys are frustrated. You know, they're in close quarters, they don't have a vacation, they're just brewing all the time. And this is actually when the ban against women were enacted, because they thought that, you know, a bunch of men are always around each other, they're frustrated, and then they thought that a female presence during such times could be a little bit of a distraction, let's say. So that is when the ban on women came into play. For centuries, you know, they had these false, absolutely ridiculous explanations as to why women were not allowed. So they would say things like, Japanese sake deity is a female, and therefore if females come into the brewery, then the sake deity would be jealous. Or they would be like, females would menstruate, so it would spoil the sake, or something like that. So all these crazy reasons.
Yeah, I also heard someone said like the chi on their hand is bad for sake, or
yeah, exactly. Like ludicrous. But given these like stupid, ridiculous reasons, women were not allowed for centuries. And the ban, like I mentioned, finally lifted in World War II. But even then, for a few decades, many breweries actually still upheld their ban on women until, I would say, around 20-30 years ago is when you really started to see that ban lift. But thankfully so, because now we have people like Ms. Fujita making absolutely amazing sake. And if, you know, speaking of Ms. Fujita, she actually has a really interesting story. So she actually was born and raised in Tokyo. It was unfortunately when her uncle, who was running Mioya Brewery in Ishikawa Prefecture, unfortunately he passed away. And so it was up to her, her father, and her brother to take over the day-to-day operations of the brewery. So Ms. Fujita completely left her life in Tokyo. And she actually worked in marketing for a toy company, specifically cars, like toy cars. So she had this great job, she lived in Tokyo, that's all she knew, but she left all of it to go to Noto Peninsula and Ishikawa Prefecture, which we've both been there.
Yeah.
It's beautiful,
But
especially if you're used to Tokyo life. Like, that is a sacrifice she made to leave Tokyo and her amazing job that she was, doing so well in, to go to basically the countryside. But it was all to save the family brewery. First, it was supposed to be her dad and her brother manning the operations, and she just went there to help. But her father and her brother quickly realized that she was just running everything by herself anyways, and she was doing a fantastic job. So they quickly made her president. And then after she was president, she decided to seek out the help of Mr. Yokomichi, who is the head brewer now at Mioya Brewery. But he was basically this up-and-coming brewer that worked in a number of different, very well-respected breweries throughout the country. And so she called upon him to say, hey, why don't you come work for my brewery? And according to Mr. Yokomichi, he actually was kind of skeptical about whether he wanted to take the job or not because she was female. And he thought that because she was female, she was going to ask him to make very feminine styles of sake that he wasn't a fan of making. And again, with the gender kind of stereotypes in Japan.
what's that style?
Yeah, so they claim that feminine styles of sake, very sweet, very fruity, very floral. So, it's a style, it's an absolutely wonderful style, but it's not necessarily like only women like it. But in Japan, it's classified as a female's choice of a beverage. So anyways, he was really worried that she was going to ask him to make that kind of sake. But she quickly nipped his worries in the butt in the first interview because she got right down to business and she said, I have a new philosophy on sake, and it's that sake should be really good pairings for food. And she said, I want you to highlight the kind of natural umami that comes from the rice. And that's what we should be highlighting. Can you make that kind of sake for me? And Mr. Yokomichi just immediately was like, yes, this is a woman I could get on board with because that's exactly the type of sake I enjoy making. So since they've entered into a partnership, they've really blossomed as a brewery with Mr. Yokomichi's expert brewing capabilities and Miss Fujita's marketing skills. And they've won awards across the country. They've done a really great job of tapping into the export market. Like, we're the only ones that have imported them in the UK, but they've done a great job in the States and also in Australia as well in terms of selling their sake. When we actually asked Miss Fujita, as a female, have you ever encountered any problems? She's actually said that it's actually only worked in her favor because she's been picked up by the media because she's female, so it's great exposure. And also when selling her sake to a number of different retailers across the country, a lot of the people working in retailers were female. And because they were female, they tended to listen to Miss Fujita more than the other people selling them sake. So she, is saying that now it's working in her favor, but she's definitely striving to make her brewery into a place where women could come to work for her for absolutely no pressures about anything, and they could even have a family while working at her brewery as well. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yay!